Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: rude customer demands free return shipping for a mix-up. They end up exposing their own mistake. The second story: husband uncovers his wife's affair with a married man. He exposes the truth to everyone involved. Careers destroyed, lives uprooted, and sweet revenge delivered. The third story: after covering unexpected costs for an ungrateful ex's party, he's hounded for a debt. Okay, paying it back in coins. And today's first story is: gonna be nasty and complain about shipping costs to me? Turnabout is fair play, friends. I'm a mid-level manager for my company. My duties mainly revolve around marketing and managing our e-commerce websites. Because of my position, I sometimes get customer service calls escalated to me, which means if I'm talking to a customer on the phone, they're usually not happy. I received a call from a customer who is very upset, demanding a return authorization and shipping label to send back a product she recently purchased. According to her, we had sent the wrong product. Now, I'm more than happy to accommodate customers and certainly understand mistakes can occur in fulfillment. However, this lady was extremely combative and uncooperative from the jump. I asked her to read me the model number of the product she received, common troubleshooting in this case, to identify where the mix-up occurred, and she immediately spat back the same model number on her receipt. When I told her the model she read was the same as what she had ordered, she rudely said, "You effed up," citing the product was not as advertised. At this point, I was calmly trying to explain to her how the product should function, as I could tell she was older and possibly just didn't understand how to get it to work the way she expected. I didn't want her returning the product she ordered only to purchase the same model again and having the same problem. She wasn't having any of my attempts to help. Within a couple seconds, she passed the phone off to her husband, who wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise. He demanded a return authorization and shipping label, and in the 2 minutes it took to put that together for him, I got to sit through his tirade of insults before I could end the phone call. Multiple times through this jaunt, he complains about the cost of shipping, how he better get his shipping refunded, and he'll be deed if he has to pay return shipping too. Whatever it was done, sometimes you get rude customers. I move on with my life. Fast forward a week or so later, the return package arrives. Inside of it is not the product the customer ordered. In fact, it's not a product our company handles at all. My guess is the customers purchased a lot of similar products around the same time, and they confused the product they received from another company with the one they ordered from ours. We sent them the correct product the entire time, and the one they returned was probably incorrect. They just had the wrong company to return it to. I figure when I originally asked the lady what product she received, she was just reading back from the receipt, not actually bothering to check the box to see she had the wrong company altogether. Normally in a situation like this, we would send the product back to the customer and close the return. But I remember the crap I had to take from this couple and I'm feeling petty. So I called the customer and pointed out the product they returned wasn't what they ordered, and asking how they'd like to proceed. I've got the initial lady I spoke to on the line at this point. She's clearly not showing any more humility or respect toward me, even after being told the fault was their own. She tersely tells me to send it back. Sure, I say, knowing exactly where this is going. All I need is to know how you'd like to handle shipping. Would you like to send a shipping label or should I charge your credit card? Oh, it was glorious. Within a minute of arguing with her, her jack A of a husband was on the line, telling me I can't charge him to ship back his product. He then goes on to admit what I expected all along. He needs the products he sent to my company to return to the company he actually bought them from, and I'm effectively holding the package hostage. I let him know we're perfectly willing to send it back, but since we covered the shipping to get an unwanted package into our building, we're not covering shipping sending it back due to their mistake. He huffs and puffs but knows he's beat, since he made a very rude version of the same argument a week ago to me, and says he'll get his wife to handle it. That was over a month ago. The package is still sitting on our shelves with his return information, likely well out of any return period from the original seller. Haven't heard from the dynamic duo since. I smile every time I pass it in the warehouse. The next story is: cheat on your wife with mine? I'll burn your life to the ground. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our 2 kids were about 4 and 6, still young. But not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some SH was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF, where they discussed how my wife was regularly effing one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife was also talking SH about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, and locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch. Then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other and the fallout absolutely effed mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in, and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. Edit. I was definitely angry with my wife, and don't get me wrong, I made her suffer throughout the divorce. For example, she wanted to try couples therapy and I agreed. Not because I thought there was a path to reconciliation, but because it felt good to lay out exactly how I felt about what she'd done. How disgusted, disappointed, and angry I was with her. She always left those appointments in tears and would sit bawling in her car for a while before pulling herself together. Eventually, she realized that it was already over for us and canceled the remaining appointments. I also had to think about what was best for the kids. I wasn't going to bring the chaos I experienced into their lives where I saw my parents screaming at each other, my dad calling my mom a W, and worse, and vice versa. It was in their best interest to make things go smoothly. I've never told them the details of what happened between their mom and me, and I probably never will. I don't know what she's told them about it, but I still have Ron's report stashed away in case they need to see the truth. Also, I wasn't really angry with Bob for my own sake. I was angry with him on behalf of his wife. I felt like she deserved to at least know what was going on, and what she chose to do about it if it was up to her. Bob's consequences are due to his wife's, and probably her dad's rage at what he'd done. I just lit the fuse. The third story is a refund to the nearest cent. That was a few years ago. I, male 22, was working in a foreign country for 6 months. The company that had brought me over was also managing the accommodation I was staying in and looking after a lot of other people in the same situation as me. Young and on site for a few months to work for a local company. As a result, I was living in a sort of small, very friendly expat community of around 40 people. On the whole, we saw each other a bit all the time because we lived in the same residences, and we spent a lot of evenings together. Not everyone was necessarily the best of friends, but there were several groups of friends who got on well together. I dated a girl, let's call her F, for a few days before ending the relationship, because she was incredibly boring. Of course, she didn't take it too well, but it didn't matter. We just ignored each other cordially for most of the evenings in the group. One day, F wanted to organize a themed evening where we had to award prizes based on votes like the funniest, the most beautiful, the one who drank the most, etc., in the style of an Oscar ceremony. Everyone loved the idea and could vote, but people wanted me to be the one to host the evening and present the prizes to the winners. I was often the funny guy, which is why the others wanted me to host the evening. F reluctantly agreed under general pressure, and to tell the truth, I did too. I was a bit put off by the idea of doing it, even though the concept was really cool. As a result, I found myself having to help F organize everything. She had a lot of ambition. You could tell she wanted it to be perfect, even going so far as to find a photographer. She asked everyone to contribute to the evening. Not a huge amount either, but still a significant one. The problem was that when the day of the party arrived, F realized that she was going to need a lot more help than she was willing to accept to organize the whole thing, and a lot of things were badly planned or evaluated. Not enough food and alcohol, logistical problems with chairs and tables, quite a few things in the end. I had to pay out of my own pocket in a hurry, and willingly, and arrange with a friend in his pickup truck for us to manage the logistical stress 1 hour before the start of the evening. F was unbearable, refusing to let my friends help with the organization, although they were invited to the party, and explaining that my purchases were perfectly useless, because not everyone consumed like I did. I kinda ignored her and just do the work with the friends and keep in reserve the extra food and alcohol. Anyway, the party took place and it was a great moment, except for F, who withdrew crying in her room in the middle of the evening because it was raining a little and so it ruined her perfect party that she had taken so long to organize. Result, I still had to manage the rest of the evening alone in the end. And I even had to feed the poor guy she found as a photographer while the guy did it for free. But he didn't pay his participation, and he wasn't in the group of people invited, so he just had to take the photos and not participate in the party. I introduced him to everyone, and even gave him an impromptu award at the end for Best Photographer. In the end, the party lasted way more than expected, and the reserve I prepared was all drunk or eaten. F came eventually back and also enjoyed the end of the party, and the bottle I did buy too. Where's the problem, you'd tell me? Well, F had the nerve to call me the next day asking me to pay my share of contribution, while I had paid more than 5 times the amount for food and alcohol that she did not want to plan. So I ignored it at first, but every week she insisted. Until the day I left the country, when she even sent me a message to tell me not to forget any part of my debt. I had a few hours after packing my things waiting for the taxi to take me to the airport, and before going around to say a last goodbye to some. I had a huge bowl in which I left all my small coins. So I counted all the coins and fortunately there was the sum, but I still changed some big coins for small ones from a local seller. I filled the equivalent of a bottle of 2 liters like that, and I went to say goodbye to everyone. I met F and handed her the bottle in front of everybody, and loved the look on her face when I gave her this big heavy bottle. It took me more than an hour and 30 minutes to count everything, but it was worth it as a friend told me afterward that she did count it to the last cent. That was my petty revenge. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.